Good afternoon. Thank you for being patient with us as we all meet in the same place. This is Becky Gibson. I'm here in Sandra Hurst's office in the penthouse of ADE. Okay, it's just the top floor, but we like to think of it as a penthouse. And Sandra Hurst is here with me. Sandra is going to be running a chat for any questions that may be asked while we're talking. If we have time at the end, we will take some more questions. Also, you will have additional resources for help if you need some additional details on this work. We're here today to talk about changes that have resulted in TESS and LEADS as we have moved from the flexibility law into the Act 295. So today we're going to spend some time talking about Act 295, some words that you may be hearing or you may have already heard. And if there are changes in practices, we're just going to review the basic organization and operation of the system. Also, we're going to talk about a different kind of end of year ratings for this year. And we will be talking, just mentioning some of the things that our office is working on now. As I mentioned before, ESEA flexibility was the beautiful piece that brought TESS and LEADS into our lives, because when we left No Child Behind and we were told that we could have an excused work of getting away from every single child being at least proficient, then we were required to create statewide teacher and leader evaluation and observation systems. So that's where TESS and LEAD came from. Now we are operating under the federal mandates of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. And basically what that means is that our focus is on student growth. We think that the vehicle to student growth is student-focused learning, and that's what we're working on together. So our emphasis now is on teacher and leader support rather than assigning letter grades to anybody or making judgments about what's going on. We want to help people grow so they can help students grow. The primary understandings from Act 295, which was passed during the regular legislative session of 2017, are these. The first says that we will begin a greater flexibility in issuing information about program implementation to districts. Will no longer be prescriptive. Remember how we used to say, now if you're going to do formal, you need to sit in that chair for 45 minutes and you need to write down 5 pieces of evidence. And of course, that's being a little silly, but we did tell everybody you had to have this many observations, you had to do this and this. And our training was built off of best practices, which is what we all want to strive for. But now the important piece is going to be that most of the items we work with are going to be allowed to be covered under local decision making. Where you find yourself in your school or your district, the implementations of protocols and procedures that have been successful for you, those are the ones you should stay with. There are very few non-negotiables in the new setup under Act 295. In addition, we are looking toward moving to a professional learning system that is personalized and competency-based. Everybody's familiar with the fact that we are going to have to continue some sit and get, but that's not going to be our primary way to learn for teachers. Hopefully we're getting to the point where we will have time and efforts enough to reach each teacher where they are and help them. And also competency-based means that we don't just say, hey, sign your name here and you came and that's all good, but we're able to allow ongoing learning, and we're able to give feedback for that and allow teachers and leaders to prove what they have learned. Before, our unit was called Educator Effectiveness, and because we've changed the focus of ADE both internally and externally, now our unit is called Educator Support and Development, but we kept educator effectiveness in our division. So we still retain all of the E's, as you can see. But if you start looking for documents on arkansased.org, gov, sorry, man, you can't tell that was 10 years ago. You will be able to find us also under Educator Support and Development. When Act 295 was passed in 2017 and has since been translated into rules that are now available on the website, and a copy of the statute is also available. These are the things that we will keep in our practices. TESS and LEADS are systems that remain consistent, and they are statewide practices. Before, we said if you were a teacher or a leader in a school or public charter school and you were a licensed educator, you had to use TESS and LEADS. And now the Act 295 has told us that as long as you are operating in a position that is equivalent to the educator assignments that are traditional, whether you are required to have a license or not, everyone must work through this system and use a shared vocabulary and shared understandings to grow. We also want to be sure that we focus on effective practice. A couple of years ago, we would look for quality by saying, how much education have you had? How much professional learning have you done? Now we're looking for success in implementation of instruction. In other words, who really gets the job done? But more than that, getting the job done doesn't just mean that the teacher successfully carries out all the tools and strategies that need to be there, but that they are going to be impacting student growth. And I know a lot of you have seen the webinar that tells us what the ESSA school index is going to be. And now, rather than having a separate piece of student growth embedded in the TESS and LEADS process of determining final ratings, we are going to continue to use the student growth processes that are embedded in both rubrics. We will continue to have the PGP guide. You'll find all of the same features and functions in EdReflect, the same way we've done, so we're comfortable with that practice. The PGP will serve both those who are receiving a summative rating and a non-summative rating. And as always, we want to make sure that the work we do results in continuous improvement. These are elements that are part of TESS and LEADS now, and I mentioned already explaining all of the educators. I've already talked about student growth. Before, we would say, well, if you teach in classroom 103, then your artifacts need to be this, and you need to document this. But that's not what we do. I know that was just an exaggeration too. I forgot the boss was in here. But the idea is, where is the teacher professionally? What has he or she done? And what proof do they have that it's been done? And now we will enlarge the body of evidence to include pieces that we didn't before. So it's not restricted. It's a local decision. Also, the practices for observing and rating that I mentioned before, like how many observations are done, what the series of events or activities are, those are going to also be locally defined. And you'll see how the rest of this plays out in just a minute. As we continue the work, our TESS rubric remains based on Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching. However, we have learned now to expand our understanding. A lot of teacher groups that work with novice teachers are working with co-op groups now, and in a lot of those, and in district groups. And Maureen Harness works with a lot of pre-service teachers now too. We have found quite a bit of literature that expands our understanding of the terms that we've always known in the general practice domain. Texts such as intentional and targeted teaching, texts such as get better faster. Those things will be shared with educators this summer in preparation for the work next year. But we're excited about the new understandings that we have and the expansions that we've made. Also, you may or may not be aware that the current LEADS rubric is based on the ISLIC standards from 2008. And we are ready to, and we're seriously involved in the transition from the ISLIC standards to the new 2015 professional standards for educational leaders, and also the school turnaround framework. So instead of having the ISLIC as a foundation, we're going to look at these two sources for leadership guidance. But that's not the best part, I think. The best part is the fact that the LEADS rubric will now be formatted just like the TESS rubric. In other words, we have put the information that we want to have involved in effective practice in 4 domains and components of each domain, so that even though it is a descriptor of the functions of leadership, it will follow the same easy format of the 4 domains. And so I think when that is put in EdReflect, you'll find that it's an easy way to work. The finalization for every school and charter to be using the new LEADS rubric will be happening in 2019-2020. They are going to go ahead and insert the formatted rubric for some schools that will be piloting next year. Sandra will be providing information about the fact that there may be additional funding, so additional schools may be allowed to participate in that. But for right now, we continue to use the ISLIC as we work on having stakeholder groups come in and contribute to the direction of the new LEADS rubric. Here are from Act 295 some definitions that we have used, the way we see them, and also some new terms you may be hearing. We have always said a novice teacher is a teacher who has completed less than 3 years of public school classroom teaching experience. But now you may also know that in the new licensure career continuum, the first stage of licensure is for early educators. And an early educator is the same thing as a novice teacher. So those two terms you will be hearing quite a bit. A beginning administrator, you can clearly see, is someone who has less than 3 complete school years as a leader in a district or school. And another one that we'll be talking about quite a bit is the formative year, because now we are talking more about a summative year, which involves an overall annual rating for all of the components or functions involved in the rubric. The formative year describes any other year where it's not summative. So if it's not summative, it's formative. And we do still continue to work on the PGP in all of those years. When the new suggestions came up so that we could coordinate TESS and LEADS and Act 295 and ESSA and contribute to the worthiness of that work, it was noted that we were looking at the TESS tracks chart and the LEADS categories charts, and people were saying, wow, these are really good arrows, but some are up and some are down, and maybe one goes sideways. So it became a little confusing. So now we said we're not going to refer anymore to TESS tracks and to LEADS categories, but we still do have the practice of rating experienced educators once every 4 years on the summative rating, which is all of the components. So rather than talking about tracks and categories, we talk about rating rotations. All of you administrators were great and had to keep up with who was in what track, and you had your own way of doing this. This is just to remind us of what we're talking about. We're still going to have the rating rotation. This is not a required document, but will be posted on the tool wheel in EdReflect for your use. And we may post it on the website to be used now if you want to. But this just tells you the top row is the early educators or the novice teachers. They will not be having a summative evaluation as required by the state. However, districts and schools may say, well, we really need to give an overall rating to our teachers. So before we finish our 30-minute talk today, you will know how that's going to work. You still have that availability. It's just in a different place and will be handled a little bit differently, but you'll see that. Below, you see that the career educators are the ones that are on the 4-year cycle, and that's how it works. We will have times for other comments or questions. And if you have any of those, be sure to get back to us on it. Before we said, teacher work is in the classroom. So gather your domain 1 evidence before the teacher teaches when you talk to him or her. Gather the 2 and 3 while you're in the classroom watching what goes on, and gather, 4 afterwards. But here's the idea, the job duties and the job position of educator don't just happen in the classroom, but they happen in work environments. So now we've changed the language to we will use multiple measures, and those will be defined in categories. And these are the categories according to statute that we'll use. The first one is direct observation. This is the typical way that we have learned to be teacher observers and raters, and same for leaders. This means that the teacher is implementing instruction in the classroom. The observer is observing and will be mindful of the 4 types of evidence that we collect, which, as you will remember, would be verbatim quotes from students and teachers, non-judgmental statements of teacher and student behavior, non-evaluative statements of the learning environment, and also numerically qualified statements. Those are the pieces that give us definitive information about what's happening in the classroom. So we're familiar with that. A new term may be indirect observation. And here's what an indirect observation is. Indirect observation is evidence that can be gathered as a result of observers seeing and witnessing systems or activities that operate because the educator, either the teacher or leader, planned that process and taught that process, and now students are able to implement that process. When I think about this, I think about the example of, and this is super simplified, but going from one location in the building to the other. If you have a school-wide policy of how students should travel in the hallways, and you look down the hall and you see a class of students doing exactly what they're supposed to, paying attention, walking where they're supposed to, following the protocol exactly, but you don't see their teacher anywhere, clearly that's obvious evidence that the teacher has taught the children to do that. And it also influences both in the classroom and out of the classroom. You can also consider other campus events. We want to know that teachers can receive credit for any organization and implementation of learning in a work-related environment. So that kind of opens it up to unique pieces of evidence. I think we'll look forward to learning from each other on that one. And then I've already talked about the artifacts and data that we're going to be using. Section 6 of the Educator Support and Development Rules, which means Section 6 of the statute, says that a district may initiate a policy that may allow expanded pieces of evidence. You can use evidence from, these are just suggestions, peer observations, student feedback, or if you have a career teacher who has just finished, let me say that fast 5 times, who has just finished their 3-year cycle of working on their growth with direction from PGP, and meanwhile they have completed a certification or received a degree, that sort of thing, you may agree to allow them to use components from that work as evidence of what they are doing as far as education planning, implementation, and reflection goes. Now I want to talk about the fact that we've had to clean up our data. When we collected data before at the end of every school year, we said every teacher, no matter what you do in your whole life, you have to have an overall annual performance rating. And now we know that it's not exactly a clear piece of statistic to have teachers who've been in a classroom less than 1 year have a rating, as well as teachers who've been in a classroom 25 years have a rating and put those all in one pool. So we're honing it down to the professional performance ratings, which will be what we call the career summative educators. If you need to think in your mind about the tracks and categories, because as I said, we're not going to talk about that anymore. The teachers who are in track 2A and the lead summative year are those that we call career summative educators. I've already explained why we've done this. This hopefully will allow people to have more support for those who need it, rather than spending time with teachers who are helping you run your building properly and helping you get the job done. The first thing that should happen for the end of the year, and by the way, this year's end of year template will be released the first week of April. So the org admin is going to assign only the career summative educators. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see a copy of what observers know as their end of year task tab page. And that means that last year, every teacher you had to observe was listed on here for you to create a final rating. But this year it's going to be much smaller, even to the point that some smaller schools may have 1, 2, or 3 summative teachers in a building. But whoever your career summative educators are, they will appear on this sheet. You'll follow the same protocol we have in years past, and that'll put them on a report for Bloom Board to be able to draw out the data in the summertime. Also, in addition to assigning career summatives, the org admin will take the rest of the educators in a building, I'm using TESS as the example now, and will assign them through the bulk management system the fact that they are not required to have a career summative evaluation. This is the learner's homepage on the right. In the middle field, the end of year evaluation, their sentence is going to tell them for 2017, 2018, this learner does not have to complete an end of year evaluation. So they'll have that message, and that will be the org admin's part of end of year. The observers will go to their dashboard to schedule what should happen. Before, we had the opportunity to use an end of year summative meeting. Well, that has been removed from the observer's dashboard, and now we see a TESS PGP review and update and a LEADS PGP review and update. And here are the activities involved in this event. It's, of course, discretionary whether you use it for every single educator, although we do know it is a terrific idea to be reviewing the work that's been done on the PGP at all times and to be planning for the future. But the activities here are you can make judgments about the learner's goals. There is a page here for the learner to write reflective pieces, and this is a good part where you can catch up with the thought process that's going on with teachers and leaders. Also, there's an observer note page that is there, but you'll notice where the green arrow is, it says snapshot. If you click on snapshot, you can create for this educator an end of year snapshot. It will not appear on the report to be picked up by Bloom Board from data turn-ins, but it will be part of the teacher's record. It's up to you. If you want to say, this is a great teacher, we know enough from each other, and I really don't have to do another snapshot for him or her to know what's going on. Or if you want to say, this is a novice teacher, for these early educators, they really need to hear my feedback on some of these things. Observers can use this link to create another end of year snapshot. Details of all of this are given in a place that I'm about to tell you in just a minute. You can see a recording of the detailed work. We are asking for the end of year timeline that as far as your in-system work, all end of year ratings be completed by June 15th. Of course, we're looking for career summatives, and that we know that the data will be collected by Bloom Board in July. So that means we're asking for system silence between June 15th and the end or close to the end of July. I think we had said before July 23rd, but that will allow them time to get their work done and make sure we're clear on the processes. For those of you who need additional help with these processes, whether you're an org admin or an org lead or an observer, you can find recorded webinars that were held by Bloom Board on the help page in EdReflect. If you go to the help page in EdReflect and you search for EOY webinars for Arkansas 2018, it'll pull these two orange screens title pages up on the page, and you can watch the video and understand each of the detailed functions and links that you need to use. Also, on every EdReflect page, there is a support orange chat balloon at the bottom right. You can use that. You can call the customer service number from the help page. And of course, you can contact me. I'm here to help you anytime you need it. The additional piece for our help on this is that I will be holding office hours on Thursday, April 5th and Thursday, April 12th from 4:30 to 5:30. That means I'll be in this Zoom room. Feel free to drop in anytime if you have a question or need to. This link appears now. This PowerPoint is being posted on both the TESS and LEADS homepage on the ADE website, but you can see the commissioner's memo that has this link is LIC 18026. And that's what we're doing as far as the new work in TESS and LEADS and EdReflect. I can see by the clock on the wall that we have exactly 1 minute for great questions.
Becky, one question is, did you say that that would be April 1st, that they would be opening the tab? For
the first week, you know, you can go ahead as an org admin and assign the evaluators in the end of year templates. You have to assign teachers, administrators, and does not need a rating, does not need an end of year rating. You can assign those at any time. But as far as observers are concerned, when they go into their end of year task tab page and they click on that person's name to do an end of year rating, the steps that you go through to put that on the final page, and so the educator can have it in their end of year evaluation field, that will not be inserted for this year until the first week of April, which I just realized is next week. So probably toward the end of next week, you can find those things, and end of year ratings can go ahead and be entered. Okay.
And I can't believe you guys this morning, we had a lot of questions. Becky, that was really
That's
good.
great.
So.
That's great. Hey, thanks guys. I appreciate it. If I can ever help you, please email or call. We love working with you, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.